you joined us.
I'm not because I have to be late.
Well, thank you. It's very important to have your input on the committee, so thank you very much for your time. And the reason I will not be staying here is that I want to hear your voice at the table. Everyone here has an equal voice at the table. We suspend titles at the door, and that's why it's very important. Everyone has multiple perspectives. You have it as a parent, you have it as a professional, you have it as a community member, you have it in a whole variety of the hats that you wear. So we want to make sure that you do that, and I certainly don't want anyone to be inhibited by my title being in the room. So that's why I will be leaving at this point in time so that the dialogue is very free-flowing and very upfront and transparent at all times. If you have any questions or you need any additional information from me, Mrs. Lawson, if you just let her know, she will make sure that she gets that, and we will be sure to have that brought into you as she goes through this process of doing it. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Christiansen, and he'll start the first part of our discussion. And Mrs. Lawson, and I will make sure that we get that, or I guess you may have it, or I'll make sure that Mrs. Challenger gets that information that we were asked to give to you. So again, thank you very much, and to the members of the public that are here and the news media, thank you very much for your interest in this topic.
All right, thank you, Dr. Moxley. Sir, you want to introduce yourself to the committee?
My name is Sam, I'm a hematologist and medical oncologist.
Okay, welcome. Glad to have you. Everyone introduced themselves previously, but I'm sure we're going to get to know you. Thank you for being here, everyone. We're excited to be able to spend some time to focus on this topic and really encourage you to look at it holistically. What kind of experience are our children having in our schools across not just this area, but across English, math, science, social studies, all the different areas. And what does it look like for a child to be in our schools, and how does that feel? So just to go back over what we're going to do, our purpose, the first piece is we're going to establish a common definition of recess. Recess means different things to different people, right? So some people define recess as PE, some people define recess in other ways. So we do have a working definition that we put on your agenda that we'll start from as we start to look at defining what recess is. So this was our initial definition, and this comes from some other districts that have defined it, looking at how the DOE defines it, and also nationally how recess is defined. So ultimately we looked at that and kind of came up with this definition. So we want to make sure we're all kind of coming from the same place as far as what recess is. So we'll get to that.
What is showing up there, we don't, I don't have that.
It should be right at the top.
Very top.
Right here.
Okay.
Yes, we have someone taking notes right here, and thank you very much for doing that. And as we work through that, that'll be the first, obviously, initial purpose is how do we define recess? The second piece is we did survey each of our schools, and we wanted to get an idea of what this looked like using this particular definition. What does recess look like on the ground for our children? So we are going to review as a committee the survey results of what are our schools presently doing across our district in recess, okay? And then the third piece is we're going to go through this process called SCAN. It's a situation appraisal process, and Pat Lawson is going to take us through that, as she mentioned. And it involves what you see here, seeing the issues, clarifying the issues, assessing the priorities, and obviously naming those next steps. So we believe Pat, as the facilitator, will allow us to take the issue of recess through this particular problem-solving, decision-making process and come out of this with some recommendations, okay? So any questions as far as how we will move forward, based on that kind of summary? I did want to let you know, like Dr. Moxley, I'm not an official member of the committee. I'll be here more often than she is, but at times I will step out. But really, this is your work. We want to hand this over to you and say, come up with some recommendations to the superintendent, and so that we can move forward and determine what our next steps will be. Okay?
So we can get the plan.
Yeah, you guys can get the blame, exactly. And all the glory. You get the glory as well. So any questions, any thoughts, considerations on what we just reviewed? Anything I missed? Anyone want to add anything you feel like? We're all set? All right. So, Ms. Jarvis?
And I think when Dr. Moxley was here, we already did the introduction when we went around the table. And so we also have everyone's name here for the record as well. And we'll go ahead and clean that up once we get back to the office to make sure that everything is accounted for. But at this time, it is my pleasure to introduce our mutual facilitator, Ms. Pat Lawson, that will take us through the situational appraisal or scan as we come up with recommendations for the superintendent. So at this time, is everyone good with the definition?
Do we want to start on that, Pat?
We certainly can, and I also have a handout for you that Dr. Moxley brought in that I guess is the document that she mentioned that we have. As Dr. Moxley mentioned, this is a process we've used several times successfully on some key issues within the district and certainly within the school climates as well. We were all trained in it in 2010, and the portion that we're going to do today is situation analysis. And the failure to understand the elements of an issue can have some troublesome consequences. And when we feel overwhelmed sometimes at the size of the complexity of the problem, and we don't know where to start, we might procrastinate, we might go off and do something that might not be effective, or we might focus on some things that are easy to do, but relatively unimportant in the scheme of things. And so as complicated as it can be to handle those issues that we face, we have the complexity of that when we deal with situations that involve a lot of different people, such as this group right here and the larger group of the room. Each person and our group brings those different perspectives and has different concerns. And in addition, a lot of issues are highly charged. They elicit some strong opinions and strong feelings from those that are involved. So this tool is designed to help us clarify and manage those issues. It helps us to examine an issue in greater detail, to surface some opinions or feelings that might be emotional or volatile, to know what is on your minds and to get started on the assignment and the project and to address complex issues. Now, because this is a process, I'm here to keep everybody on track. I may move you forward a little bit quicker than what you wish to do because it is my job to facilitate the process and to keep us in the process. So I may remind you of what step we're in if something else occurs that is not working in the framework. But it's my job to assist you with this, all right? Now, the first part of this process is to see the issues. And as Doretha brought up, the first issue is to make sure that we understand and agree upon the common definition. In my research, I found a couple of other definitions for recess, but all of them were taking a break from work. Essentially, that's what it was. This definition that was proposed by the committee, if you could scroll up, Jessica, for a minute, and we'll look at that. Thanks, Jessica, by the way, for being here to help us. An unstructured playtime with guidelines for safety that is supervised by adults, but not directed by adults. Do you have consensus that that's a good definition for the group?
I wouldn't want to discount an organization called Playworks, where it is unstructured, but it's moderated. So there are successful counties and school districts that have recess coaches, so it's not physical education, but it's a way to increase the rigor of physical activity. Because physical education a lot of times doesn't have physical activity in it. It's instructional. And I know I just came back from East Detroit. I know East Detroit's had wonderful success with using Playworks. moderate their recesses. But it's not structured. It has coaches that will walk around and kind of give ideas or encourage play.
Okay.
Wouldn't that be better utilized in PE rather than in recess?
Well, physical education is instructional information on how to be healthy. This is going out and saying, well, here's a ball, here's an idea, why don't you guys catcher. So they're not
So
telling
giving
them what to do.
ideas, but not,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, it's not educating,
step by step.
it's kind of encouraging.
And Mr. Larson, you bring up a really good point, and bright people tend to go right to solving that problem, and that's what you've done. You've given us an action, all right? We're going to stick with the issue, and the issue right now is the definition. But we will have time and an opportunity within the framework to make suggestions and to take action. As you said, whether it's Playworks or whether it's PE, incorporated, etc. But the issue right now is a common definition. And you're a little bit uncomfortable with what we've got up there.
Well, it just says that not directed by adults or completely unstructured. It's still unstructured.
So you can live with that unstructured.
I think
All right.
it's a good definition, so besides and facts, really that's what it is.
All right.
Unstructured, you have adult to supervise, it's safe, but it's kids, so we want kids to do.
I like that one too. Kids doing what kids do. All right. Okay, so we have agreed upon the first issue, and we don't have to get agreement on all the rest of them. All right. Now we're just going to kind of survey, and this is a period of time where you express to the committee what is important to you about this issue, what is important to you about this concern. Let me ask a leading question. What is important to you about this situation we're in right now? What's important?
Well, if I can start.
Sure.
I mean, that's a really big question. But recess, all the research, and I've been scouring research for weeks now, say that it's necessary for academic, the academic potential. It's necessary for exercise. It's necessary for social development. A lot of students, if they don't have recess, they don't have any social interaction at school. These same students are going home and not having social interaction at home, meaning that we have children in our district who literally have no social interaction with kids their age. And that's developmental damaging to them. You know, and if you look at the United Nations actually declared human right to have a break for children in school, similar to adults have. I mean, it goes from academics to physical to basic human rights.
Okay, so you have the academic potential, exercise, and social development, all right? Have we captured it with those three? Thank you very much for starting.
And I'd like to respond to what Scott suggested. I know you talked about the social interaction, Scott, and I know that we don't have an organized recess break at each program in high school. There are multiple and many opportunities for children to participate in a social interactive way, not only in the classroom, before class, during lunch, during many of the opportunities that we provide during the course of the day. And I'd like to point out that the instruction that we deliver with the new Florida standards is very much different than what I experienced as a child. We have really shifted the way that we teach children
to express that issue, we could say that there are lots of opportunities for unstructured
There are
time.
unstructured
and-
and structured both.
Okay. And do we think we might have an issue here of what it's called at different schools? Like, we have a wide representation here of schools. When I taught, many years ago, it was recess, but I don't hear that term
What's an
as much
example
anymore.
of unstructured in class? I don't get that. Like, what do they do? Just give me an example.
All right, well, for example, we may just academically study a particular topic. And there are opportunities for our kids to work together in a collaborative way to talk about that topic. Not that the teacher is saying you have to do it this way or you have to do it that way.
But that's still kind of structured because you're still telling them, let's talk about civil war. That's what we're
That's
going to
true.
talk about. So you guys talk whatever you want, but I just want you to tell me what you think about the civil war or the civil rights movement.
We're providing some guidance to them.
Right. So I think the idea of recess, which most studies on American, also the Pediatric Association, alluded to, there's a lot of research, actually even a paper published from Urbana, Michigan, University of Urbana, which showed that if you give the kids some kind of just an unstructured activity that they can do whatever they want under like a supervision in a safe environment, that what they did is they have those kids, they have kids that they give them at least 70 minutes a day, by the way, which I'm not asking for 70 minutes, but I think that would be awesome if we can get that. And in 2 different periods, and they just let them like do all kind of activities, and then they tested those kids at even like challenging intellectual questions, like they took pictures and they asked what different color and those IQ questions. And so the kids who go through had the recess part, their answers were faster and they were more accurate. So it's not just the social interaction. I think the idea of recess, and if you read that letter from that Dr. Hart and his wife, the PhD, it's not just a social network. It actually enhances the academic development. They have better understanding of when you explain things to them. I mean, you're giving their mind a break. I mean, give an example. I'm a physician. We go to a lot of meetings. And trust me, after 2 hours, we're just like, for God's sake, give us like the 10 minutes just to get out and just talk about anything else, you know. So I think it's a human nature. So, and kids, because their brain is growing, this is more important for them. So I think, you know, I know we're going to talk a lot about what we need, but I think the goal is to make sure that there's some structured or organized recess time that schools have to have as a minimum. If you want to do more, actually it's better. You have to have a minimum. I don't know how many classes you have in your school. It's kind of different. I think it's 3rd grade. But you have to have at least 2 or 3 classes and maybe 15 minutes for the kids to do whatever they want.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you right here, and I'm going to try to paraphrase a little bit of what you said. You said you wanted to ensure that the unstructured time, that we understand that research shows that it gives faster academic responses to kids.
I mean, it's not just
after
a
they've
social,
had-
it's even academic-wise, you're going to have smarter kids.
Right.
You can have smarter kids when it comes to academics.
And
And I like the idea that he has where you can talk, you can do, and this is called social networking, you're always going to have people to say their opinion. But you need that time where kids do not have to worry about any books or homework, so they just go run, even if they just run back and forth. You
Okay.
see the kids, I mean, others, they want to do exercise, they go to the gym do an hour or go run for 15 minutes. Kids don't do that. But they exercise, they go, they play, they get a ball and they play basketball or soccer or volleyball or like the play work is talking about to provide some things for them. But they're going to run and start and run and start. They don't have this organized gym time, and that's we can get in PE. And that's the idea, is this time where they can do whatever they want in a safe environment that can develop their brains.
And I think the other thing you said about the issue was that you wanted to see some sort of schedule, did you not?
Right.
Okay, so let's capture that
So a
with
minimum
his issue
of a
and
certain
concern.
time, I think that's what the committee has to make a recommendation. What is the minimum recess time?
Well, I think
That's one of the issues.
Make it a countywide minimum time, in my opinion. I think we run into problems when we say you are allowed to have recess to the teachers, but you try to find the time, but our
It should be-
standards are increasing. So I feel like the teachers run into problems with trying to get everything done and wanting to do the best that way, and then
Take away recess.
take away recess because they feel so overwhelmed.
All right.
And the CDC, not only the CDC, but the American Academy of Pediatrics, like he was saying, I have it here, they and properly supervised recess offers children cognitive, physical, emotional, and social benefits. It should not be used as a complement, it should be used as a complement to physical education classes, not a substitute.
And can I just have a clarification? I hear the recommendation or the two of you discussing the committee's purpose is to make a recommendation of how much recess time we should have, how it should be scheduled. My understanding of the committee was, first of all, we were to decide, agree on the common definition of recess, then decide, is it something that we should be requiring in our schools? Then we can get to the point of, if we are saying it should be required, to look at, well, how much time are we requiring? What's the minimum? I just want to be clear.
I wasn't saying that was the purpose of the committee, I was saying.
She's bringing it up as one of her
I feel like that's
issues.
something
I
that the
just wanna be
committee
clear
should.
about that.
Absolutely, and we can put that down as your issue as well. And one of your issues about recess is, from what I heard you saying, and help me if I'm not paraphrasing it correctly, but that is, should it be something that is a mandate? Or should we have the flexibility within the school schedule? Jan?
I think something that would be helpful to me is, I know statewide, I mean, it's in statute, we have 150 minutes a week for kids in K-5, basically, for physical education. And it would be helpful to me to hear from a couple of elementary principals in how is the physical education structured or not structured, so that we can get a feeling, because I hear physical education, then I hear recess, then I hear they're not the same, and I just think it would be real good, because we have at least 3 principals here, and we may have a couple of other elementaries represented, just how it is structured and how it works. I think it'd be helpful to the group.
I think that would be as well.
The first thing, you asked earlier about the definition, how is it reported, physical education or recess? And I think because of the mandate of the 150 minutes of physical education, you may find in the plan book of the teacher, it says physical education when all in essence it is recess, because there's no way for us to do it, depending on your school, to have 150 minutes a week. I mean, my enrichments are every 8-day rotation, so that's impossible. So you make that up with your recess time to ensure that you at least have that 150 minutes. Now, we do recess every day, depending on the grade level and how the time of year, the weather, and all of that depends on the length of the time that you're actually out there. Now, in the physical education classes, there is a small amount of instructional time, but I think a lot of times we think about it, when we were in school, there was health and PE, and you actually had a class that you taught. So if we're doing jump rope for heart, for example, we may talk a little bit about the purpose of that, the heartbeat, and we talk about heart rate and all, and they get right into the lesson. They do warm-ups to start out, and then they do a false fraction of instruction, and then they go. And that's a 45-minute window of time that they go to enrichment. Now, like at the beginning of the year when you've got your little ones, they may go out, if they go out for 20 minutes, they may go out twice, because kids are not, the kindergartners are not used to that all-day education, so it might be a little bit different, whereas our older kids are more accustomed to it. The weather, it gets really hot, so you may not stay out there quite as long in some months as you would in other months because of the heat. And of course, we have to adjust for the cold weather. But
Can I just ask
okay.
you, so how is your day go? Like, can you describe to us, like, how do you start? How many periods do you have, and what do you do between periods?
Okay, depending on, because we have an enrichment schedule, so you have your recess, well, obviously you can't have all your kids out there at the same time. I have over 1,000 kids, and it depends on your campus size and the available space as to how you structure it. So if my 5th grade, for example, go to their enrichment classes first thing in the morning, that might be PE, art, computers, science lab, all of that.
And how long is the class?
45 minutes.
45.
Yes. And so if they go first thing, they will probably do their recess after their lunchtime, so that they're spaced out in the day.
And how many classes did they go to the lunchtime? So that's like 3 maybe?
If you have 5th grade, you would have, they go to their enrichment, they come back, so then you got your core subjects. Let me use that as an example.
Yes.
Okay, you have your core subjects.
I believe that they prepared a sample
Well, you may
schedule.
have your reading, which is a 90-minute reading block mandated. Then you have, maybe math. They may go to lunch, I would say around 12. So then after lunch, now lunchtime is a 35-minute window, but that is so that there's a 5-minute window of going in with your kids, and then the teacher gets 30 minutes of, duty-free lunch, and then they may go right after. Then I have a first grade class that may go out to lunch before. They don't understand the need to relax a little bit after lunch before you start playing. So they may go out before lunch. This sample that you have here, as you can see, there is a common star. For kindergarten, second, third, fourth, and fifth, you see some common star block time. Then you have transition time, get into the language arts, and that may look a little different depending on what grade level you're looking at. And you'll have some that, for example, when you got third, team 1, team 2, that just means that this particular grade level they team teach. So while there's a reading block going on in one third grade class, there might be a math block going on. And then you can see the blue is recess. And if you see the times, they vary anywhere from, it looks like 20 to 30 minutes, maybe a little over, depending on the grade level and the time of day. The only thing, is lunch on there? Yes. I can't see that. Is that the black? Oh, it's black. Okay, as you can see, for fifth grade, for example, they go to their star block, and then they have the enrichment, and then they have their lunch block, then they have recess right after lunch, come back to social studies or science, then come back in, and then, I'm sorry, that's kindergarten, I'm looking at that first one, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. And then you have your enrichment, then you have your math, etc. Fifth grade, which is the one I was talking about initially, they have their star block, then they have their enrichment, there's a math block, science block, they have their recess right then, and then you'll have your lunch, and then some, they have recess right after, and then they get into reading and language arts. That's a sample. Does that follow pretty good?
So if I'm in kindergarten, in a day that starts at 8:30 till 3:15, I only have 20 minutes of recess.
Depending on the time of year.
Are these guys like, how can you control these kids?
Now remember, okay, let me tell you how they do that. Well, when we do our announcements, we also have what we call exercise. So they do that in the classroom. They have it on the television, and they're jumping up and down, and they're doing jumping jacks and things like that. That's first thing in the morning that they do that. That is a part of helping us get our physical education requirement as well.
So that, I see for, maybe this is a sample of your school or something like that, but I think part of the issue, not the whole issue, but part of the issue is that's not what's being done in every school. I know last year at my son's school, Tavares Elementary School, he was in second grade, and they started Common Core, and they stopped recess. So twice a week, he got to go to PE. Twice a week, he got to have a break, while they put on more and more expectations. I don't think it's so surprising that Tavares Elementary went from a C to a D school. And I understand if it's a state, I hear you.
And
But it's something that we need to address, because not only is it going to create continually lower grades, but it's going to be bad for their psychological development as they grow older, especially when we have so many kids that are at or below the poverty line. We're talking about we need to give these kids more opportunities, the most opportunities that they possibly can, because they're not born with a lot of them. So I think it's something whether it's district-wide, whether it's statewide, it's something we need to address and figure out.
Okay. Before we move forward, I want to go back to what Jan said a minute ago and capture that. She said we have a requirement at the state for 150 minutes a week of PE. And I think it's important to form for the committee to have a real basic understanding that maybe the committee needs to discuss some of the issues that are givens that we cannot control. And someone else mentioned 30 minutes of a duty-free lunch, which impacts, of course, how you plan your day and your coverage, etc. So we need to be capturing some of these givens, things that we cannot change.
What I'm
All right,
saying,
wait just a minute,
Yeah, I think that's important.
we'll let Carmen address
Let's
that
just
for
see
a
what the
minute.
given thing, what the things that we have to go by.
I
before-
just want to address what our state
Right,
mandates,
this,
that we
I
don't
think
have
that's
any
important, right,
flexibility.
yeah.
It's 150 per week for PE is a given. 90 minutes of undisturbed reading time is a given.
A week or a day?
A day.
90 minutes daily of uninterrupted
Reading
writing.
block. Now,
Can the
in our
government do that?
schools that are struggling, in our struggling elementary schools, the state has placed an additional 60-minute mandated reading block for all struggling schools. So on top of their 90 minutes of undisturbed reading block, the state has mandated 60 minutes.
150
And Ms. Arnold, how many schools will that be in Lake County in the elementary level?
3.
All
So
right,
what is
And which
this
three are
mandatory?
those?
okay.
Leesburg, Beverly Shores, and Eustis Heights.
And what are some of the other givens? I noticed the teachers had their hands up.
And third grade students,
Yeah.
and with,
So 150 PE, 90 minutes for reading, what else? And 30 minutes for lunch?
A duty-free lunch for teachers.
Oh, for teaching.
the
Okay.
PE is a
Right,
week.
I understand, yeah. And then 90 minutes.
Then on
for-
top of that, you will need to add math, which sometimes it depends on the school. Usually the norm is around 60 minutes a day.
A day.
And then you have science and social studies, which is a minimum of around 30 a day.
For each.
Should. Some do inclusive into the reading and take the subject area, incorporated it into the reading skill so that it's not isolated, it's incorporated into, so
Okay.
that it.
So you can do that? have
Yes,
that
you can.
facility.
Are there any other?
For that one year when we did that, when the state came, I can tell you
The
that.
state will tell you that in the DA process where they're checking out schools that are D and below, they want 30 minutes of science and social studies. Separate per day.
Okay.
Even if you include the
All right.
context
So
area.
there's
still
some-
separate.
So the
There's
kids
some
are
givens.
not as smart, so let's give them more material that they're not smart at, so they can be even more.
So,
I
if-
have one more
if-
thing to say on the PE. It has to be in increments of 30 minutes,
Yes,
not less.
no less.
So,
Okay.
So 30
if you-
cents.
so if you have specials that run 45 minutes, there is also a conflict.
but if our kids are only scheduled for 2 PEs that are 30 minutes,
45 minutes.
30 to 45 minutes, right? So that's not 150 minutes.
Right.
So if our kids aren't getting 150 minutes, that's a big part of the problem. I get that, it says that.
They're
So they're getting the hundred.
Then
They're
they
getting
get it
it
because
listed
you
in
mix it
other,
up.
they may get it in 15-minute to 20-minute increments for the rest of the week.
You're not allowed to, you have to have
Has
30
to be
minutes.
30.
Yeah, and if I can add in, we got.
Oh, at her school.
Okay, this
And every school has state
discussion,
law.
this discussion is great. One of the things that happened prior to today, in preparation for today, is that a survey was taken of the elementary schools to see how each school is addressing it. Would that be information that you would like to look at?
Yeah.
Well, if we could add into the requirements real quick, that we also should include that Lake County schools goes 225 hours over the state required minimum. So aside from
Per
those.
year?
Per year. So aside from those 3 schools that have the hour extra required, there's over an hour per day of time that's not required by the state to do anything. That's an
And
important
Pam,
point.
could I raise a question? I know, I like to stay on track. It's just me. I know we talked about having the principals describe what PE looks like at their schools, so we get a better idea of how that might fit into the process. And we heard from one of the principals, but there's 2 other principals here. And I think I'd like us to continue that discussion.
All right.
Finish with that particular point, and then move on to the next piece.
Go right ahead.
So Kathy, you want to-
Go ahead.
All right, just at our school, I can tell you, our physical education teacher, the way we structure our PE block, she starts out with an introduction to the children, essentially talking about whatever the skill is that they're going to be covering. There are some common exercises where they do calisthenics, warm-up, etc.
She introduces them to the skill, models and teaches the skill, and then the children have an opportunity to participate in practicing the skill either in an organized or unorganized game where they're interacting with each other as they practice that particular skill. There was an opportunity for them to have one, and it's so hot, so water breaks and periods of time where they can just sit and talk. So that's what physical education looks like for us and for our students.
How many days?
And they do it, we're on a 6-day rotation, but they get PE every other day. So 3 times in that 6-day rotation, our student, actually it's 3 times per week that they actually have PE, organized PE, and ours are 45-minute blocks. And then we do the additional 30 minutes or 50 minutes in the classroom during one of those days. That they have to provide a block of instruction, because we have to keep it to 30 minutes, that's physical activity related, that could meet the requirement for recess. So that's what physical education looks like. And then the other question, Pam, if I could just kind of regress, we asked in the beginning, we sort of skipped over this part 2, just kind of get back to it, is some of the concerns. What are some of the concerns? So,
Well, I think before you go to that,
Can you talk
let's
about
let
recess,
Kathy
though? You talk about
finish
physical
this
education.
thread.
Okay, mine runs along the same line as yours. We go to PE twice a week. And if we have a different schedule on one of the Wednesdays, then you go even more often, you get a whole hour. And when the rest of the time is scheduled in the classroom, or the classroom teachers take them on site. For my little guys, and that's not in here, they go usually every day. Depends on the weather, and depends on if it's hot or if it's raining, or how many people are out there, because there's only limited amount of space for kids to go. So that's probably another consideration that you have to have when you have 7 classrooms. We all want to go out there, and they can't go during reading, they can't go during math. They can go after lunch, but then you have all the other grade levels out there too. So that's a difficult thing. So.
Okay, so one of the issues and concerns to you about this is just this. The space, so that needs to be considered an issue.
Why is there not
The
enough
space, then also
Property.
the
Yeah,
The size of the
Very
property.
yes.
To the amount of space, we are at capacity, we can't put any more portables. We, for great playground space, went to portables, yes. So we're very limited to the space we actually have for the children to play on.
Okay, so
They have
space
to take
and also scheduling, right? Did I hear you say, Kathy, they have to schedule? You have to schedule to take turns because of the space.
And then you have to be careful on when in your instructional day they can go.
Because those givens can't be.
Yes. They
Okay,
can't go play in
scheduling.
traffic, they can't go play in the park, they can't play in the parking lot.
And if PE is out there in their class, you must work respectfully in the other leftover piece of property.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Um,
that is an issue.
Let me explain that one of the reasons I'm wandering is I have a hearing impairment in my left ear, so I'm trying to keep my right ear to you, and I don't mean to make you nervous wandering around your back. I just want to facilitate and be where I can hear everyone. You wanted to get back to an issue.
I wanted to just kind of raise the concerns issue and what would be my concern, which
Sure.
the idea of, first of all, let me be very clear in stating that I absolutely agree with Dr. last name, Hussein, Dr. Hussein, that recess, physical activity, the ability to interact without direction with other children is a perfectly appropriate research-based practice. I absolutely agree with that. I think it's good for kids for us to provide those opportunities. So I wanted to state that. I'm not against recess. I'm not against the idea of providing opportunities for our children to interact socially in an unsupervised manner. I think all of those things are important. And it's important that we build those into the school days. When we talk about social interaction, I know that all of our children over the lunch hour have an opportunity for at least 15 to 20 minutes of unsupervised or undirected social interaction during the lunch hour. They can, well, I'm just telling you, at our school, that's what we provide. That they can talk to each other, they have that unsupervised time, or supervised, but they're safely interacting with each other after they've eaten their lunch, and they have that time to do that. So I'm just, let me finish, please.
And so that is something that we do provide within in the school day. They also have that opportunity during the breakfast time when they're in there. They can talk at the breakfast table while they're having their breakfast. So those are two opportunities that are unstructured social interaction times for our children. Okay, now I want to point out, just getting back to my concerns about recess. First of all, we don't have any playground. I have playground equipment for my kindergarten children. So I have a big empty open field in degree blazing plus heat and heat indexes, even still, that are over 100. So
All right,
we're already
so-
2 months into the school year, and for me to provide outside recess time for children, we run into that particular issue. Okay, number 2 is the issue of supervision. Now, yes, it's easy to say to children, okay, everybody stay in this square block, which I'm gonna, but you've got, multiple classes out there on an open field. You create opportunities where children can be far from the teacher or close from the teacher, and so there's always a supervision element that is of concern to me. Third, most of the time, and I've been a principal for 20 years, I've been in education for 29, and I've been in many school situations where we've had recess. Most of the children don't participate in recess. They stand there and they have the social interaction, which is an important aspect for children to have social interaction, but they're not out there running around chasing each other, playing ball, and participating in physical activity while they're at recess. It's just an observation from my experience. The other piece that concerns me is recess to me. To me, the purpose of recess should be to give our kids that, like Dr. Hussain talked about, that break from, the work that we do, academic preparation, so they have an opportunity to sort of let their brain rest, to deactivate so that they can reactivate with more energy and more focus.
All right.
Okay, I get that part, all right? I still got 3 more here.
I
our
appreciate
teachers-
that you have 3 more, and I'm going to share with you right now a paraphrasing of the 1, 2, 3, 4,
Okay.
5 that you've shared, and we're going to try to get some opportunity for some other people to speak as well. And it may be that they hit on those, and if they don't, we'll come back.
Okay,
all
because I
right?
think the last 2 I have are really.
I say let us finish.
Let it finish? All right. Does the committee say let it finish? Go for it, Pat.
So, like I say, our teachers, we work with our teachers, we train our teachers to understand and recognize when we need a break, okay? And Dr. Zane, you've sat in those meetings, I've sat in them too, where the presenter says, well, I've got this much left to cover, should we keep going or do we need to take a break? And they're really like, let's keep going, we're on a roll, everybody's engaged, and so.
Must be different meetings.
Yeah, maybe so. But the reality is that I trust my teachers to know when our children need a break and to recognize that they need a break and then provide them an opportunity for a break, whether it be social interaction or physical activity that can be done in the classroom or outside. I am totally okay with that. My teachers have the professional responsibility to recognize those opportunities and provide children a break when they need one.
Okay.
To be scheduling recess takes away the opportunity for the teacher to use that break when it's most appropriate over the course of the day.
Okay.
All right. The next thing, social interactions and physical activity are 2 separate things. I think both of them are benefits of recess periods, but there are also other ways that we can provide that opportunity for the social interaction, not necessarily during the recess break. And the last thing I want to say real quick, 15 minutes of recess is 30 minutes. Okay, by the time I, as the teacher, collect the children, get them ready, walk down the hallway, get them to the playground, get them out, let them out there to play, then it's hot out, get them back to the classroom, everybody needs a drink of water, get all that organized, get them through there, 15 minutes of recess equals 30 minutes. That's just guaranteed.
All right.
Very much.
Thank
Those
you
are my
very-
points.
Thank you very much. I have down, trained teachers and educators are, be aware that teachers and educators know when kids need a break. And social interaction can be done at another time other than recess. And 15 minutes per day of recess actually means 30. Now let's hear from the teachers if we could.
Could I jump in real quick before we move forward?
Sure.
Okay, first of all, we keep talking, you had mentioned about lunch. I think it's also important to point out that the children at Leesburg Elementary specifically, because that's some of them, I know it's parents, don't get to choose who they sit next to. We're not allowed to talk loud. And so I know that at least my son has never been able to sit and socially interact with his friends. He's not allowed to get up and leave from that seat. And so he sits there quietly and eats his food because his friends have to sit elsewhere based on whether or not you bring lunch or you take one. So I don't think lunch really social interactions happening. The breakfast, maybe, if you go to it, so you gotta come to school early. My son doesn't, so. As far as the temperature, I mean, Miami-Dade has a policy, and it has had one for 5 years. It's hotter in Miami-Dade. I just don't see there's any merit. Supervision, like I said, I just came from East Detroit. I understand Lake County's not East Detroit. East Detroit, which is the worst part of Detroit, has recess. I think if there's a supervision problem, we have bigger issues to talk about. Not participating, I want to see some research. I have studied after study. All these show me one article that says they're not participating.
I'm saying to you, sir, that
Because-
if you take the children out to play recess,
Yeah.
you'll have a few kids running around, but you'll have other groups of kids standing around talking to each other and socializing. So if we're talking about recess as a physical activity, if I take a group of children out, I'm saying that my observation, having seen this for multiple years, is most of the children are not running around having physical activity. They are chit-chatting, talking, sometimes arguing, sometimes fighting. There's a lot of supervision issues with teachers just making sure kids are playing appropriately, talking appropriately. That's what I'm saying when I say, can I anticipate?
Let me stop through for just a moment, okay?
Well, one thing, you say trust teachers. My son's in 4th grade, he's never had a recess, not one. I'm done trusting the teachers. I'm done with that.
But let's not make it personal now, let's just talk in general. So
So,
let's-
let me just say, I wanted to respond to, what he's saying. I actually agree, I don't think every kid goes out there and, runs really hard when they get to recess. I mean, I have two polarly opposite children who were raised the exact same way. I have one that I stayed home with him when he was young, and all we did was stay outside because that boy needed to run. My daughter, you take her to the recess, and she will find a pen and paper, and she will sketch, and she's only 5 years old. So it's not an age. Some kids just need that activity more, but I think what recess provides is that opportunity for someone like my daughter to chit-chat and be social, or someone like my son to be able to run and get a little heart out before he goes back in and runs a little more.
And I appreciate all these different perspectives. And that's what they are, different perspectives. Because the committee is at the point right now where we are only just trying to see what the issues are for each member of the committee. Then the next step would be for us to clarify those issues and concerns. All right, so we need to work a little bit harder at just seeing what those broader issues are. All right, and I'm hearing them and I'm capturing them. And what I heard for you was a personal concern about your child, and that needs to be brought forth. I happened to be at the board meeting where you brought forth that about your son as well. And we appreciate that parent perspective, and we also appreciate the principal's perspective. And so he's concerned that sometimes not all children are participating. And that to encourage them to participate, he also mentioned that he didn't have any equipment. And then you mentioned that you didn't have a location. So these are those issues we've got to hammer out: equipment, location, scheduling. Is lunch, recess?
And my next door neighbor's a kindergarten student. She was told that the playground equipment's poison. Poison? That's the story she gave me. That she stares out her window all day in kindergarten at Leesburg Elementary, and she can't play. Yeah, I don't know. But I'll tell you that kindergarten play equipment, that's not being used either.
So I wonder how many of the schools are like your school and don't have.
I have
We're
some.
going to get to
I
that.
have
If you
kindergarten
hold that for
playground
just a
equipment.
moment, I want to let Ms. Tobias speak, because she has
Well, I've been
spoken
over
up
here,
quite a bit.
I've been over here tallying, I took the survey, and I didn't take the survey, I looked at the survey and took the information from it.
And I'm wondering if the discussion maybe can focus on, we seem to have a couple of hotspots, but if I tallied correctly, and we look at the survey, we are saying that 13 schools indicate that their students are getting at least one recess per day of 1 to 15 minutes. 13 of them
That
report
is
that.
15. The survey just meant from 1 to 15.
Right,
so
no,
but
15 is the number.
Right, okay. One school indicated that some of them are 1 to 15 and some of them are longer than that.
Yes.
5 indicated that they have one per day longer than 15 minutes. Okay. And then 5 schools indicated that they have recess, but it's not daily, then it went down to the 2 or 3 times per week, depending on it. So I'm wondering if, as we talk about this, that the problem may be, or the perceived issue may be a little different than just what we started with. It may be that we have more happening here than we think we do. I don't know. I'm just taking the survey and tallying it.
Right, and I think this survey point is very important, that you're all looking at that. She had her hand up first, I'm gonna
Right.
recognize her.
The definition of survey, when you took the survey, was maybe misunderstood, because when you count the PE that's not actually out at the field as recess, and that doesn't meet the recess that we are looking at right now. You see what I mean?
Okay.
In other words,
All right.
the
That's a good discussion.
definitional definition
Right.
of recess.
Okay.
Right, because,
And that's important to know.
because I look at mine right now, and if I add that particular quote recess, then I have recess every day. Do you see
Right.
what I mean? So
Right.
it depends on what you say recess is. And
And
it's
I-
part of PE, then it shouldn't be recess, but then it's
Okay,
required.
so let's put that down as an issue then, that we need to decide as a committee whether we are addressing,
Is that a clarified issue?
yes, yeah, whether we are addressing PE within, recess within PE or separate.
And that was my point, because we keep
Uh-huh.
saying like physical activity and stuff like that. The definition of recess is unstructured playtime, could be like sitting down, sketching, or talking, or playing, with guidance for the same environment with supervision. And the kids have to do what they want to do. And I think the issue here with the survey that I have, that a lot of schools probably answered how they're supposed, when they were told that they can have, based on how the teacher feel. Like you said, sometimes teachers feel that I'm not done yet with my, so I'm gonna skip recess today, but they were told that this is what you need to have. You need to have like one a day, 15, 30 minutes. That doesn't mean they have it, because I heard from a lot of schools, they say, well, they're supposed to have it, you need them to have it, and then we ask the kids, like, they don't have recess. So the survey is based on what probably the teachers were told to have, that doesn't mean it happens. And the other thing is, again, it's not physical education, doesn't mean, it's not PE, we're not talking about PE. PE is structure, PE is a class, that's totally different. We're talking about a period of time where the kids can do whatever they want. They don't need equipment for that, they don't have to have equipment. They don't have to have big space, they can stay inside classes if they want. The idea is just to let them do what they wish to do without any structure.
And I think that you go back to that original definition, I said that recess is actually just a break from work, that, rather than
They
maybe
don't have to
playtime.
have all the run around and do things. Just like her daughter, she can just sit down and talk to nobody.
Maybe she
that's
wants to
a-
draw,
Dr.
right?
Hussain, do you think also something in here that could be clarified is, sometimes when you ask your child, did you go out for recess today, I can tell you from my personal experience, no, we played dodgeball.
Right.
No, honey, did you go out? Why'd you do at recess today? We had jump rope competition. The terminology at different schools,
Could be,
what
yeah,
recess or an activity is, you ask them a specific question and they'll, no, I didn't do that. I did this. When actually, it's something that we need to get a unified term. That means a unified.
If I could clarify, my son actually has had recess. He went to Lake Montessori for his 3 through 1st grade, so he knows exactly what recess is.
I'm just saying that
No,
some
but
kids will
you're
come
right.
home and
Some
not
kids
say
may
it, so
say,
it's a
yeah,
universal
not
term we need to get clarified so that everybody says the same
No,
thing.
if I remember my childhood, wasn't that too long ago? No, I remember like when recess happened, you say it takes 15 minutes to get the kids in class. We have a bell ring. Like after the second period, then we have like 10-minute recess. Every kid run out of the class. You didn't have to have teachers saying where to go. And then once the other bell rang, that means recess is over, everybody came back to class. Like maybe 1 minute, I would like to go in and out.
I'd like you to come to my school and we'll try that one time.
Let me say a little something about that, because I actually subbed a lot in schools, so I understand why some of the people that are working in schools may laugh at what you're saying. It makes perfect sense what you're saying, but I do realize it does take some time. But I wonder if we, instead of having recess before the next class, if we've had recess before lunch, which a lot of studies have shown not only that kids will actually eat more of the lunch, but that they are calmer in the lunchroom, which I know you say that's a free time, but at our school that hasn't generally, it's eased up a little, but I went to have lunch with my son one day and I felt like I was in prison because when the lights went off so many times, you know, and you're not allowed to speak when the lights go off, that it was a little stressful to me.
So maybe that issue
But maybe
could be
maybe
a
if we-
scheduling issue?
Yeah, maybe if we did recess before lunch, I mean, you're giving kids, I mean,
All right.
I think kids are more likely to try to run in and go get something to eat, and, hey, we're gonna go do math now
Right.
and division and multiplication.
And again, one of the things that I'm going to have to say is that, again, with a bright group, you start getting to those answers and solutions. You start getting to who is, going to come up with a solution to this. So it's very important in this process to stick with just the issues. So your issue is still recess, and the one about maybe having it before lunch is a suggestion, and that's her part of the issue.
Yeah,
All right.
important.
I want to ask the teachers now to express to us, what do you see as issues for you, and what are your concerns about this?
Well, one thing I want to say is that this is the 21st century, and I can honestly say that I don't think I'm that much older than you, and I know that when I went to school, we sat in a little sled desk and we sat in the rows, and that's how we learned. And in today's classroom, it's not like that. The kids are working collaboratively, their desks are grouped together so that they can have discussions. We try to have them actively engaged in whatever their learning is. So it's a very different situation than when you and I grew up. And so they do have socialization time. So that's where, my thing is, I wanted to clarify, are your concerns with the socialization or the actual physical activity? Because I'm hearing both.
I think we're concerned of like having unstructured time. I think that's really the magic word, the unstructured. It's the time where the kids really don't have to be told what to do or what to work.
Or what topic to talk about. Particularly outside, because
This is just
if you
unstructured.
have
Whether it's social,
inside-
whether it's activity, it's just unstructured time. I think that's the secret.
if you have inside recess, that has its place as
It's
well, but
training.
ultimately, it would be great to have it outside, because I mean, you have your inside voice and you have your inside way of being, right? That's what we teach our kids is, you're inside, you act like you're inside. If you want them to be that way, you go outside, right? That's what we've always been, I've always known. So, to me, I think it's a good break for them to just be able to run and go, or sit and play, I think it's just, I don't think it's an outdated, nostalgic kind of thing though, because there's so much research that supports that it's not just something that we used to do that we all thought was cool and now we want our kids to do it, like have Cabbage Patch Kids. There's research that shows that it's really helpful.
Well, my concern is research, and this isn't old research. This is a lot of this is published the last couple of years. But when I look at research, I always play devil's advocate. If I believe that we should have recess, then I'm going to go out and try to find research that says I'm wrong. The fact is what you guys are doing collaboratively, it's not enough. I mean, I can't find one study to say that. And I've looked all over. I have all this on digital, I can share with the committee. I think that I should before we meet next. And I beg you to find something to tell me the kids don't need recess, so I can see it, because it's not there.
I wasn't saying they don't need it. What I'm saying though is that it is a very different time and the kids are actively moving and they're doing things where they're up and they're moving around in the classroom. They're not just sitting at a desk all day long. it's not like that anymore.
So they
So
might not
I
be
just
the
wanted to
same
make sure
here.
you understood that, because I understand she substitutes, she sees it.
Yeah.
I don't know that you gentlemen do, and that's the reason why I'm asking if you've been in the classroom lately, just like kindergarten. All they do, everything they learn is through active play. It's not, they're not just sitting. Because with a kindergartner, you can't sit longer than 5 minutes. If you're trying to keep them, longer than 5 minutes, you're in trouble. It doesn't work. And I taught kindergarten through 5th grade. I know.
Thank you for your perspective.
The collaboration is awesome, but it is directed by adults. So it does not take the place of recess for me. I'm an advocate of outside recess because I think they need the sunshine and the fresh air. I think that's an important part of wellness and teaching them. I mean, some of the most joyful moments of our childhood is the time that we spend outside. And so for my class, I have full participation in recess. The first graders don't hang around, but they are supervised and they're safe. And if you ask them, even with building the houses for the 3 little pigs or whatever other awesome activities we do, if you ask them what their favorite thing to do at school is, their favorite activity, they're going to say recess, because it is.
Where do you teach?
Pardon?
Where do you teach?
I teach it to Gary's Elementary first grade, and they embrace it, and I think it's and I am an advocate of outdoor recess, and it's 10 minutes for me, and it doesn't take me 30 minutes to do it. Now I am already outside. I mean, I'm coming from lunch, so I mean we can knock out 10 minutes of recess and be back in the room. And while they're going to the bathroom and getting water, we're working on our math journals. So we are making optimum use of all of our time. I have a bucket of ice in the room during these hot times. They go and put a cube of ice in their mouth to cool down after recess. So another favorite thing of theirs is a cube of ice to cool down after recess. So I have to say that the collaboration and the sorts of joint learning activities that are taking place in the room are not substitutes for recess.
Okay, all right. Anything else that needs to come forth in terms of issues?
I don't see it as so much as an issue, but I agree with the philosophy of what Ms. Nielsen is saying. And she, as a teacher, is at discretion any given day if that was the appropriate time to take them or at a different time to take them, and that she should have that professional judgment.
I think what we need to do is to have at least a minimum. And then you want to leave it to the teachers on fine. I mean, I think everybody would agree with that. So teachers know better what's going on with their kids too. But you should have some kind of minimum, like you have to have at least 10 to 15 minutes every 2 or 3 periods where the kids can just have like free time. I'm not saying 50 minutes a day, at least twice a day. But I mean, that we can come up with, we talk about
Clarify.
recommendation.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention, you talked about the campus structure, and you've got different campuses all over the county. It just depends on where your school's located. For example, where my school is, and the way it's structured, the hills and our protected fenced off area that we couldn't bother with, we've got equipment on, say, if you're facing my school on the right side, that pretty much my K through 3rd do. They go to that. And then they're very close to pavilion where there's PE, so they're in close proximity, so they have to be watched constantly. My 4th and 5th graders go to the very opposite side of the building, which was originally our bus loop that is now our car loop. And so the kids don't have any equipment out there, but they'll take the football, they'll take the kickball, they'll do hopscotch, some of the old games, and some of them just walk. And so while they don't have the equipment, they find the time to do that. And depending on how long they're out there, the heat is how long they'll stay. So you have those campuses that I'm fortunate enough to have the separate areas, but not necessarily equipment on both sides. Now, and the equipment that is on the right side, that the K2, sometimes it's an issue when kindergarten and 3rd are out there because you've got the little ones and both playgrounds are right next to each other. So it really means that you've got to stay on top of that. We can't go out, say after, there's like a 3-minute break between lunch teachers going in for the cafeteria. So we have to create a schedule to ensure that we don't have an overload of students out there. So while the formerly bus air loop is called now the car loop has a much wider range of property for them to be out there. You can get more kids out there. Like I can have all of my 4th grade kids out there at one time. I can't have all of my kindergartners out at the playground on the other side because it's such a small amount of space. So we have to create a schedule to ensure that everybody gets to go out there at a reasonable amount of time so that everybody knows kind of where everybody is. So it depends on your campus again. Whereas somebody else may have only one area, so it's limited for them. But we don't have equipment at both sides.
You know, some of this
Yeah.
also might have to do with where we grew up. I came from Michigan. My mom was a teacher in Michigan. It's unheard of there to have recess. And I can remember for 2 years they took out a playground when I was in school and they had to do it, so we shut down the parking lot. And that became a replace. I mean, and then the Juncos came out, the chalk came out. That's actually where I learned Junko. But I mean, I can remember freezing cold days or stormy weather when they was in the classroom. You know, it wasn't about where, it really was about a break. Now when we were outside, we really were exercising and more in the classroom, we had to be a little quieter. Nothing could have ever come between us and our recess. And as I went back and asked people, you know, what's it like now? Because they're doing Common Core, I understand that's a concern there. You know, they have the same standards in Michigan we have here. And I said, well, my son doesn't get recess, and they were horrified. I don't know if it's been that way in Florida. I don't know if Florida, it's just different here. Where I'm from, I mean, it just wouldn't even be a discussion.
37 years and I've not been a principal at any school that didn't have recess for any particular amount of time at teacher discretion.
Well, like I said, my son's gone to Eastbury Elementary from 2nd grade to 4th.
That's all I can speak to.
He's never had one. That's single. Yeah.
I wonder with the equipment, if we could somehow send out a letter to parents. I wonder if the parents knew that you guys didn't have the equipment. I mean, it's not that much as a parent to be able to like buy a soccer ball and somebody else buy a
We're
basketball.
not talking about
No.
Playground
balls.
equipment.
I'm talking about
Jungle gyms.
the jungle
slides.
gym,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
you know, an opportunity, like some
Swings.
swings and those kinds of pieces
Because
of
we
that.
you have like
Jump ropes
oh,
and
yeah.
Sure, I
balls.
can
Oh,
go
yeah.
soccer ball,
Yeah,
football.
we even have a basket that has extra if you have a class that needs it.
We're just
that needs
talking
to
those
take
real
something.
playground.
Can I clarify something for you? I'm really picking up on, from you two that I can appreciate it and you too, that you're looking at more of a mental break, and just a simple stop and take a breath type break called recess. Unstructured, somewhat. Where it happens isn't necessarily the most important part, is that it does
That's a
happen.
very big concern of mine, is that it is somewhere where they can actually take a break. Because sometimes I feel like in the classroom, I mean, you have this kind of double standard then, is in the classroom, be quiet, follow instructions, but, okay, now you have 10 minutes and completely divert from that. I think that might be, especially for the smaller kids, a little bit difficult to do that and then go right back into their lesson. So I think in that way it could cause more of a disruption potentially.
Two other classes around.
Right, I mean, because I know at our school anyway, at Tiberias Elementary, you know, you can hear if the class next to you gets loud or anything like that. So to me, it just makes more sense to be able to differentiate for those smaller kids. Hey, you play out here, you want to be loud out here, you want to run around, you do it out here, but when you get in the classroom, now we're back to learning, and it switches in your mind. I get if there's a problem with space, that makes it more difficult, and if you needed to, that's, you know, you need to do it in the classroom. But just to clarify, I do think that the placement of the recess is important.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question of clarification?
Certainly.
For safety reasons, what happens if you have to evacuate the school with no space? I mean, if there's really no space to let all the kids out, the entire school out, because if you did recess, you broke it up into 3 sections. I mean, if there's no space to do that, is Is there space
I
to
can
evacuate?
answer that because we do fire drills on a regular basis. And what we have to do is when we evacuate the children, they actually go across the road from the school and stand on the sidewalks. It's not a huge space where they can run and play. You know, and I don't know, come to Eustis Elementary one day, you'll see we are so limited to the amount of space we have.
I think if there's limitation space, because I remember like, again, even like when we used to have different teachers for each class, so even when the teacher go on the other thing, that was like 5 minutes in between. And that was like a slow recess for us. We like had a break, we talked, we did all kind of things, and then they come and then everybody stays quiet. So I think, you know, if you don't have space, what are you gonna do? I mean, at least give them that time where they have just a structured activity they can do. They can go in the hallways, and you can have like a block of classes that can do that. So this way you don't interfere with the others. Like they can have the same time. But she's right. I mean, it's better to have a playground or somewhere we can run and get out of the class. But if they don't know if it's raining outside, what are you gonna do? If it's drenching rain, you're not gonna.
You'll take a break
Right.
of some kind.
Right. And you have to.
You enter, we do, yeah, and we do endure.
And we got in the heat. I mean, like, my kids were at the soccer league, and they played in the villages like at noon for like 30 minutes each half, and we still like were running around. So it's not easy for kids to get. I mean, 15 minutes is not gonna kill a kid from heat stroke. That might be like
No,
this.
no.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. I mean, I grew up in Kuwait. That's like nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Even when we went home, we go out and like it was 100% humidity and heat. And I mean, now I can stand it. I mean, now I get it.
That's right.
Okay, what I think I heard Carmen do for the group was to clarify that the couple of concerns that we were hearing was for recess definitely, but also for just an unstructured time when children don't have to work. And you did believe that it was important to be outside first of all, but we also understand limitations of Florida weather, and most recently we've all been dealing with a whole lot of rain, and we can't send children out in that as well. The see the issues portion of this problem solving and decision making is, I believe, perhaps completed. Now, I've done notes that are short and bullet points, and I know that Jessica's done some more detailed notes for us. And so, as we go through, could you perhaps change color or, you know, or do a different size font or whatever so we could bullet so we could bullet point some of these? Do you need a break? If you need a break, we're going to trust that the restrooms are out here and down. If you need to go, just get up and go. But could you use different colors so it'll stand out? Well, we're going to go back in and
Do another survey with the
yeah,
actual
in order for
definition.
us to clarify.
Because I want to compare it to recess.
Okay.
Okay. So,
You made a good point. What? Mr. Larson made a
It
good
wouldn't be
point.
very valid, you also have to look at other,
There's so many
the
other,
other parts.
there's so many
Well,
other
there's-
things.
This is not going to be,
There are a lot of other parts, but if there's, you know, you can put it in a correlation.
Scott, if I could just say, I mean, there are so many uncontrolled variables in what makes a school great that to say that there is a correlation, I mean, a correlation has no meaning, literally. We can't say, well, if that's an A school and they offer recess, then we can say, well, that's a good thing. There are just way too many factors from, you know, the quality of teaching to the, you know, I mean, I could go on and on about differences.
If it's a 30% or 70% or even 80% correlation, you're quite right. If there's 100% correlation, and there won't. But
I recommend either one, because one is the schools that have more recess, or the more because for other reasons.
You just,
It's not good science.
that's what they're debating.
I think it would be good to do the survey because I understand Mr. Larson said, but if we didn't have a uniform idea of what each principal was answering, then what we have doesn't tell us a lot. And it seems to me that we we want to put out clear definition and maybe to separate the two. I don't know, one
I
with
actually-
pure recess or one with.
I actually think, I'm not sure, I saw the survey, I actually
Yeah.
thought the definition was at the
Okay,
top.
right.
But
What
we
I
can
heard
show
when
it to
we
you.
discussed.
Oh, here it is.
Here it is.
Yeah.
And I'm glad Dr. Kladowitz has had an
But
opportunity to see this.
when I mentioned the numbers that were in each category, I immediately got back, well, that would depend because some of us answered this way and some of us answered that. So I'm concerned that we may not have all
Okay.
understood.
Let's
I'm not
see.
saying they did or didn't. I'm
But
just-
see, it never occurred to me to consider PE or physical education when
To
I was
me,
doing
it
the
says
survey.
recess, but
Yeah, I didn't think of it that way,
But I
but
mean,
then
there's another
others
thing between
did.
mandatory and optional, okay? I mean, so, yeah, the teachers can take the kids out, but it's not, it's up to them, if they feel like the children need a break. I don't have mandatory recess if we're doing elementary school. They're not required to take them out
That's what we're working.
for 15 minutes a day.
So what
That's
we're
why I'm
working
saying-
toward is, what I'm hearing, instead of getting into all the mandates and all the legality pieces, are we looking at an assurance that district-wide, children are getting a break day?
Yeah, even the schools that are reporting recess, a lot of them are taking, and the reason, and I understand the reason is, a lot of it is the mandated hours you spend in the classroom is different for 4th through 12 is 960 hours a week. That's 720 for K-4. So I mean, actually the state builds in recess.
It's 300 minutes a week, academic services must be provided with the additional 60 minutes for struggling schools. That's 360 for struggling, 300 minimum is required for all schools. 5 hours a day, 25 hours a week to 300 minutes to 360 for those struggling.
Is that helping? Are they
Yes.
seeing- Do you see results from that? Is that making schools better?
The state has seen.
That's been in place for always, the 5
I
hours a
understand,
day.
but are they seeing results? Do these schools do better when you give them more hours? They are.
I think you're struggling children with remediation, yes.
The state went from 100 to 300 school. That's
Yes.
how much success they've had.
And that's research based, is it not?
Yes.
Oh, that's not a very neutral comment.
But
I
just,
apologize. Yes.
I wasn't gonna say
oh. I just wanted to make one more, point with the recess. And this is more on a psychological and sociological basis than necessarily an academic basis, but I think we've already gone over in length of how much there's been study that it could help with academics. But I think for so many of our schools, and I said this, I touched on this a little earlier, but so many of our schools, we have kids who don't have a lot of opportunity, and I think that should really be considered when we're talking about things like recess, and we're talking about giving kids a chance to get out and let their brain relax and recharge. Because I can get around not having recess. I honestly can. I mean, I play football with my son every morning. We ride bikes in the afternoon. I have the time that I can do that, but not everybody has that opportunity. There's some parents, both parents are working 2 jobs and have little opportunity to be able to take their kids outside when it's still daylight because they're working until it's dark. So I just think it should be taken into consideration that, yes, of course, the parents should be involved and do things, but sometimes that's just not possible because of their schedules and their circumstances. And I think we should really think about that. Because it's not just academic. If we're just looking at academics, and I know that's what creates money and scholarship and all the things that we need in order for the schools to operate, but if we're just looking at academic and we get our kids through and they become adults and they were great academically, but they are failing socially, then we fail.
So what I'm summing up here is, we want to take a look at what's in the best interest of the whole child,
Right.
the whole
Not-
being.
Not just
not just one
Is this
aspect,
only
but
on-
bringing in all of the whole child and looking at all their uniqueness.
It's not just academic or cognitive, it's everything, it's social, it's even health-wise, it's everything.
Because
Yeah,
maybe
academic
all
is
their
just
needs
one
at
part.
home aren't being met, so some of those needs can be met at school to make it more wholesome for them.
I'm trying to focus
in
on
a more
academic
whole-
because
right.
we have that excuse that, well, the teacher felt that it's not because they have to finish some curriculum. Well, this is as important as what the teacher is teaching, and that's the point of mentioning academics. So the point
No, I
is
mean,
that because it's like, you talk about academic, well, this is very, if you want the child to be smarter and grasp and understand, and even like understand in shorter time, so you don't have to spend longer time, you have to give them recess. It's not the other way around. It's not you take recess because you have to explain longer or spend more time explaining your point. So that's what we hear. Teachers couldn't do it because we have all these requirements, they didn't have time, so taking over research.
I'd like to ask a question of the committee because there was some concern about the survey, and I heard somebody say they might want another survey, but let's look at that survey again if we can. They had to give the name of the school, they had to tell what recess included at their school. I believe that Ms. Jarvis, you directed this to be filled out by the administrator. Okay. So they counted unstructured outdoor playtime, opportunities for supervised activities, but supervised activities outside of the classroom, library time, craft groups, running clubs, required structured activity, or was recess incorporated in PE, or no recesses offered. And I don't think that those results, we have compiled those, but can you tell us generally what was kind of the response to that?
The most responses to that particular question was the unstructured outdoor playtime, which the students typically got up to 15 minutes a day. And we had many of the survey respondents added that recess time, they counted it as a part of physical education.
Okay.
Those were the two that really stood out.
All right. And then how many opportunities for recess are scheduled per day? You have the results of that. Those have been compiled for you. And then how many minutes? And you can see incrementally for number 5.
Yeah, and see, here's the problem, I'll just tell you, when I answered the survey,
Sure.
I didn't have a choice but to say 1 to 15 minutes, okay? Because there's not one that says 0. Not that we have 0, but I'm just saying it says on average, how many minutes do students spend each day at recess? There's no option for someone to say we don't have recess. And I'm not saying that that's the case, but I'm just saying that wasn't one of the choices.
Number three, no recess is offered.
Yeah, but that's
Okay.
not being compiled. I mean, so I'm seeing the survey doesn't really, I guess, speak to that. When I look at this survey here, this is answering, this looks to me like it's number 5.
It's more than 5, I think.
It is 5.
How many opportunities and what's the line?
Yeah, it's a
Right,
combination.
so it's kind of a-
Once
but it
a
doesn't
day,
really-
twice
This
a
doesn't
week.
look at the number 3 data, is what I'm saying. It
Right,
doesn't
this
look
is
at-
just an excerpt of that.
Yeah.
Piece there, absolutely.
That's, I'm just responding.
And also, I know for a fact that
Were there-
a lot of schools will say,
Were there any schools in the survey that did absolutely say no recesses offered at school all day long? No. That was not a response in any of the schools. Now, in terms of the survey results, you have data that shows that the majority of the schools are doing some sort of recess, but not all of them. I think we had just a couple of schools that you might have mentioned.
so these were going up to do recess? Is there a single class in there that has recess?
I'm telling you, they're allowed to take their children out, but I don't say they have to, and I don't say they can.
It's up to
So,
teachers.
It's up to the teacher,
Are you
because
aware
I'm a very strong believer. I can't think of any offhand that take their children out regularly for recess. I see children, classes outside, but again, I don't mandate it, I don't require it. I do have the teachers make sure that they monitor whether the children are on task and focused. I mean, let's face it, we're here primarily to keep our kids safe and ensure they're learning, okay? And any way that recess fits in for physical activity or social interaction to support the learning of our children is what I encourage our teachers to do. And I'm just saying that there's no fixed, everybody has to take their kids out for a blanket amount of recess every day, or there's no requirement that they do so.
But when, and here's my concern, I mean, it's those of us who studied study research, every expert says it's necessary for learning. And I agree with you that the job of the school is to keep the children safe and to ensure they can learn. When every single expert says they need between 20 to 30 minutes a day that they're not learning on optimal levels, what does that mean that we should do as academics?
I see plenty of kids that are perfectly successful without having recess, okay? In the definition of recess, kids running around, the physical part of it. I'm just saying there's just so many different ways that we're looking at providing opportunities for children to interact socially. You know, that unstructured time versus the physical time. And I don't think it's as simple and cut and dried as saying that if we give our kids recess, they're going to perform better.
As your facilitator, I'm going to have to ask that we stop right here, okay? And I know that you two appreciate the dialogue, especially since you're from one specific school and this parent is one specific school.
So we like each other.
And so we would have, that's right, but we do want to make sure that we're, because it's a district committee, to make a recommendation to the superintendent, so we have to make sure it doesn't get focused on anybody's personal issues, but that we're making these recommendations as a group. Actually, when we talked about this in pre-planning to come,
Worst case scenario,
when we talked about coming together as a group and making sure that the situation analysis would fit this group, we wanted to make sure that we have an opportunity for everyone to see the issues and clarify those issues and then assess those priorities and take some next steps. And when we first planned it, we were thinking, oh my goodness, this may take a while. But actually, I'm hearing so much at the table about consensus from the majority of the group that I'm really not as concerned. So before we go into the next step, I'd like to ask the committee, is there any additional information moving forward that this committee feels like they need in order to make some informed next steps?
I had a question to the principals. I know you were saying that you leave it to your teachers and you kind of let them assess whether they need it and you don't mandate it. Do you feel like your teachers have the opportunity to take their kids out, given the amount, given the workload, given how many more tests and everything that we've been added on, not necessarily by the district, but by the state. Do you feel like your teachers have that time if they wanted to take their kids out?
Given the new Common Bell schedule, I think it is time to do it.
How about Ms. Blar, how do you feel about that?
Well, I feel that my teachers do go out when they need it, and I know for kindergarten, first and second grade, almost all of them go out.
Right.
When they don't have PE, they go out every day. There is physical activity. As a matter of fact, I have seen kids in my school with an envelope running downstairs, Coach, and I said, where are you going? Oh, I need to take the envelope to Coach, and Coach takes the envelope and says, go take it back, just so this child can
Has the break.
have the break.
There's
So,
nothing in the envelope, is there?
nothing in the envelope.
Thank you, Ms. Blar. I'm going to ask Ms. Cole, excuse me.
I understand completely. Real quick though, with the survey, did you do by grade level?
This is for the committee.
Oh, I just asked them at the front, and they told me that's why you come, so they told me just go ahead and jump in there. I just wanted to know if the
Actually,
survey
you're
by
just here
grade
to
level.
listen.
Okay.
We're
All right.
not, and we
Okay.
welcome you to come and listen.
Well, I just didn't know if you did it by grade level, that was my only concern.
You are welcome to
survey.
listen to the discussion. Ms. Cole, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't mandate it, but I don't have to because they take them out. They do, and we create a schedule so that the front office knows where the classes are in case they're looking for a student. But yes, we're calling out there all the time looking for somebody that's out there. Yeah, they do it.
So,
So you feel like they have,
Oh,
you guys
yes.
collectively feel like the teachers have the time to do
Oh, yeah.
I think they have the
They-
time, based on the new bell schedule and the fact that we are providing more instructional time throughout the course of the day, I think we should.
The time varies, but
It does.
are they encouraged to?
It's up to them. I don't discourage or encourage them, okay? But mind you, my situation is a little bit different. I am 2 months at Leesburg Elementary School. I'm evaluating programs and looking what's working and looking what's not working. You just don't jump in somewhere and make wholesale changes in practices. You take time to assess, identify priorities, and move forward, and you make those decisions as they're proven.
So priorly, they weren't.
I don't know what they did last year.
And I appreciate the fact that you can't really address that because you weren't there. But, you know, and we understand your concern. It's true. You do have a specifically different situation in being new, and we're glad to have you, Dr. Collins. We're glad to have you on the committee. So in terms of any other information that the committee feels they need, do we think we need? I mean, are we comfortable with the survey results?
I have some information I think we need moving forward.
Yeah.
I have to excuse myself because I have a meeting at Lake Julius. At 4 o'clock. But the concerns, or the things I would like to know are how many schools have actual playground equipment in place, or space for actual playground equipment in space in terms of jungle gyms and swings and all that sort of stuff. And then I'd like to know about cost. If we were going to purchase those kinds of items for schools, you know, I think there's a cost factor in there. I think it's important to know how many schools actually have a space for recess. I think it's important to know, based on population and schedule, how can do we have the space to be able to get everybody out? I mean, some schools may have enough space where they can send 200 children up for recess, you know, 3 times a day and be able to get everybody out. I have 800 children. I can't necessarily do it that way. So there are some limitations in terms of how we could structure something like that.
Okay.
So those would be some things I'd like to
So
know.
a survey to space issues, equipment, and potential costs, all right, at the elementaries.
Well, when you get into that, you've got to remember, a lot of new schools helps with their construction monies, the newer schools. A lot of schools, their PTO communities have taken it upon themselves to provide the children at that school site with appropriate equipment. And there are state safety guidelines that have to be followed before you can even think about purchasing the equipment beforehand. So there's a lot of specifics in how much depth of mulch is available. There's a lot of specifics to just say, let's get equipment out there. There's a lot of variables that you just have to keep in mind.
That's a very good point,
Just keep it in mind.
that we need to find out
That's a whole new ballgame.
what are those situations,
Okay.
clarify some of those issues.
But I think we're talking about that mental break, that thing that a ball or a jump rope or just a shaded tree or a sit-down area or a piece of chalk on the sidewalk, that's what we're talking about mainly.
And maybe also on
No, it isn't.
Was I
All
hearing-
schools have that.
Right. Was I hearing too that what we're wanting, or what I heard was, or what we could agree to, is that we need assurances that those kinds of things are happening when in a consistent fashion throughout the district,
In all our elementary schools.
in all the elementary schools. Okay. And for a clarifying issue, one of the issues that we talked about was, look back, some of the givens, we were talking about minutes. Right now, it looks like there's a range of anywhere between 15 to 30 minutes a day of recess. And we're talking about recess separate from PE.
Yes.
Right? PE is 150 minutes a week. All right. And you said that's required to be in 3 30-minute sessions, Ms. Ballard?
No, it can be, it could be 45 minutes, but it cannot be less than 30 minutes.
Correct.
Okay.
And that
from my
sometimes runs
understanding,
into a scheduling issue.
some schools substitute some of that PE with the recess. Within the 150 minutes, they don't have 150 minutes of
PE, but they make that up with recess.
See, and that's then where my question came in on the survey, are you using that specific time then for recess? Or is it still considered,
The terminology is.
right, there was the
It does say
terminology
this,
issue.
It does mention, it specifies this is not PE.
Correct.
Yeah, it
It
does say
does.
that.
It does.
Right, but if you're asking teachers, when they're saying this, the 30 minutes, they're calling it not PE.
And again, so I hear that that
It's really extended
terminology
PE.
is very important
Right,
in
that's really
the,
what it is.
in
Yes,
the
I
learned
assurance
that
that the terminology be understood, whether it's PE or whether it's recess. Yes, Ms. Cole?
Well, we were asked as principals to submit our master schedules. And within the master schedule, most of us put in, like the one you just saw, with the recess. Now, for me, I can't do 150 minutes of physical education like on the enrichment wheel a week, because I'm on an 8-day rotation. So some weeks a class may have, a grade level may have it 2 days a week, some may have it 3 days a week. So what we do, we have the exercise that they do in the classroom every day, every morning, that might be anywhere from about 15 minutes. Then they have, by doing recess every day, we're well over that. So you compensate for that. For me, I'm talking about for my school. Now, some of them may do it on the off days of PE, that they do the recess to make sure they have the 150 minutes. But it depends on the school itself. But if you do the exercise as part of that, because it's free play, I mean, they're jumping up and down, but everybody, you're not disturbing another class because everybody has it on. So, I mean, you know.
Sure, absolutely.
What happens to a teacher if their students don't test well on that standardized test? Am I correct in knowing that it hits their salaries? And if it does hit their salaries, do you think that it impacts their ability to make a choice to risk going out and having recess? I don't know, I don't work in the public.
But I think you bring up a good point, and I think what you're saying is, professionally, do you think that all the focus on Florida standards and all of our rigor, and is that impacting teachers being able to make the choice to have recess?
Comfortable making.
Comfortable. And I think that,
so. And I'm not just speaking as a teacher, I'm a mother of 7 children. So, you know, I like the new standards. I love the standards, I love the rigor, I love the expectations we have for the students. And I don't feel like that has any impact whatsoever on whether or not they're taking those children out for recess. To be quite honest with you, it more or less has to do with a lot of teachers and a lot of the students. I'm hearing about the heat outside. You know what I mean? So they'll do exercise inside, or they'll do free play inside. So you may not see them outside playing, but they are having some recess time and some, yes.
and I think that common terminology that parents and teachers and educators understand that will maybe come out of your group. You know, she just said free play, somebody else said free time, somebody else said recess, somebody else said PE. So if you come up with that common language recommendation for the superintendent.
I actually had a 5th grade teacher, and because I had a parent call me because she was concerned that her daughter had come home and said they didn't get to go to recess. So I talked to the teacher, and what that teacher did in his classroom is that the kids would vote whether they wanted to do indoor play or go outside. And the majority of them voted to stay inside because they didn't want to go out in the heat. And I understand that it's much hotter in other places, but those of us who are spoiled to the state of Florida, you probably feel like you felt when it was 150 degrees anyway. That's how they feel. But and she was fine. Once I said that, she said, well, you know, I thought it was something like that maybe. Because that's the way that their class ran. The kids got to vote to have game time, which they picked their own games, and because they didn't want to go outside of it. And my kids are miserable when they don't get to go to PE because they do know they get engaged in games that they love. And you'll have PE teachers, and I don't think it's just unique to my school, that will pick those organized games that the kids absolutely love. You've got the competitive ones because they love. They do that, yes they do. They do the dodgeball, the game out, they do all kinds of stuff. Something about going to jail, I don't know, it's all kind of games that they do that they absolutely love. So, and I like the mental break, you're right.
Correct. But I'm hearing a whole new ballgame of break, mental break.
And they have to do it during the day in the classroom. They can't just, they do that. I can't sit there all that time and not have a moment to get up not gonna be reflected on the master schedule when they do that between their classes.
But there would be an assurance perhaps that it was being done, and the leadership of the, are you saying the leadership of the school would ensure that those kinds of things are happening?
Does anybody know, I mean, I know you guys are kind of on the, you know, feeling like breaks are important, kind of mind frame, but does anybody know across the board amongst the teachers and amongst the staff, whether that is shared or whether that's been talked about or addressed, that the importance of having breaks or, you know, with, you know, because we constantly are going to have new teachers coming in, we're going to have people fresh out of college, and, you know, there's a difference in what you learn in college, and there's a difference in how it can actually apply. So is there anything that addresses that so that everybody's kind of on the same page of knowing that breaks are needed?
I may not have said to every teacher or a group of teachers that you must remember to give kids breaks, but I do have every teacher send me their schedule. And we do walkthroughs and find out who's on, and all you have to do is listen to the radio to know who's outside and who's not. Or you, like I'll even say, I've now had a teacher say that, you know, Ms. Cole, did you look at this window of time? Because it just seems like there's too many kids outside at that particular moment. So then we talk about revising the schedule. But I ask for each one of their schedules so that I can see what they're doing during the run of the day. So if I want to do a walkthrough, I know when they're in and when they're out, or when they're at recess and when they're not. So I don't go looking for them when they're not there. So I think that a part of this is working closely with the principals and the schools, obviously, making sure we understand what their message is out there, whether they, did you know that I think that was important, somebody mentioned, do teachers feel the pressure and not feel comfortable taking them out? I don't feel like that's the case, because, I mean, you're talking about of 20 minutes, I mean, really. I mean, we have an extended day, so that almost
Even if it's
isn't costing you any extra time. We've always had standards. Yes, we do have new standards, and it's always changing. And there is the pressure of the unknown. That, I think, is the unknown. It's not so much as the new standards, it's the unknown and how it plays itself out. And yes, the evaluations they get, you look at the progress monitoring our students, we look at the scores, we look at it individually, we look at it grade level, but we look at it from a perspective of how can we support you in making sure you have resources and putting together that collaborative time. So that if I'm struggling with this particular standards that my kids didn't do well, but you're doing really great, show me what you're doing. And Ms. Ballard mentioned her wonderful Wednesday. We've actually are going to that and waiting for approval to put that in place. So every grade level gets a complete day, entire Wednesday to plan and collaborate together to ensure that we're meeting the kids' needs to get those scores up. Not that, oh, the reason you didn't make any scores is because you're taking the kids out to read. No, that is not the way we move it.
Like I say, it sounds like I'm beating up at least for elementary. What's the reason? But there's reason for that, and it's definitely not Dr. G. I talked to teachers over there. The research says that this is a social economic issue. The poorer the community, the less likely for recess. East versus the poor school. It's also the worst case scenario, because I'm actually middle school that they're at. And I know that over Beverly Shores, they do have recess in some grades, but not nearly as much as you're going to have in Grassy. So this is a social economic issue. There's also an issue of a lot of times, from what the research says, that teachers fear of how am I going to control the students, because a lot of times they didn't grow up in that community. They're from a college, they're from a higher social economic community. And that's, again, in the research. I think it's really important that we really read through it and see what the issues are, because these are studies that we've done for thousands of schools. And I just really want to emphasize that I'm an academic, but we all are academics, and really believe the research should drive this. One last point, SEIU has a guarantee on the contract to describe the related recess. Faculty has a guaranteed contract district-wide related recess. Our children are the only ones that don't have that district-wide guarantee. So maybe we need
Recess or break?
Right,
Like
recess, break.
planning.
That's the same thing.
15-minute break.
No, that's for the adults.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, I consider my break.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I got it.
Exactly.
All right.
Okay.
We have about 8 minutes until 4, and so we're going to do some summary activity and make sure that we're on track for our next meeting. we mentioned that we would like to have a survey done of some of the elementary schools to see about what locations they have, what to do recess in, some of the equipment issues, and let's see, one of the other scheduling space and equipment. I think that's what we wanted to make sure of. Is that correct? Survey to space issues, equipment, and potential costs. Thank you so much, potential costs. And who's going to be responsible for doing that?
Are you looking for space issue, I mean, you're looking for equipment for the playground or just your break time?
I just was.
That was Dr. G.
It was Dr. G, and what he wanted was, he wanted to know about what kinds of equipment other elementary schools have. And I don't think he was talking about
That's
soccer
through our
balls.
warehouse
No,
department.
He was
That's not
actually-
something we would survey for. He could get all that information from the warehouse and I can make it aware. No, I don't think that's a survey
I
at
think
this
that
point.
would matter when we make recommendation for this.
Correct.
Okay,
I
so
agree
the
with that.
committee agrees that information isn't necessary for this
Correct.
committee.
Correct.
All right, great. In terms of the next step, which we'll do at the next meeting, which is to clarify those issues, we're going to have a really pared down list. Of course, we'll have the running notes that we have from today's meeting that has captured all of what you're saying, and you'll get a copy of that. But I also will work from the notes and develop a bullet list of all the issues. They won't be done in narrative form, they'll just be a bullet list, because we'll come back in at the next time and clarify those, assess what the priorities are, and I really believe we may be able to get right to the next steps within another meeting if we can commit 2 hours to it. And am I seeing agreement?
I think so.
Okay. In terms of another date to do this next meeting, you get out your calendars if you've got some calendars with you. Has everybody got the calendar? I'd like to suggest that we look at October 7th or October 23rd or the 28th. The 7th is a Tuesday, the 23rd is a Thursday, the 28th is a Tuesday. And perhaps, is this time good for everybody, the 2 to 4? Is this the best time?
On Thursday?
Since I'll be here, if possible.
Oh, okay.
On a Thursday?
23rd?
The 23rd then? Would you like to do the 23rd at 2 o'clock?
23rd is
It's a
Thursday.
Thursday.
so and that's
How does that look for consensus?
I mean, would the other mind if we do it at 8? That's good. That would be a problem.
Yes, because the teacher contract is till 4. So we want to have a 2-hour meeting, so.
Well,
Y'all
yeah,
don't
when
leave
I'm
it,
there,
I'm
when I'm there
sure.
till 6:30, it's hard to, it's hard to relate to the 3:30.
So 2 to 4 on the 23rd, correct? The other thing is, has everybody provided their email address? We might want to have some email addresses if we need to send anything out to the committee. I certainly have everyone that works here's email, but if I could get our community members' emails, I appreciate it.
Do you have a card or a paper clip? Okay, good.
Okay, thank you so much for your work today. Y'all did a great job. And not only scratched the surface, but actually scratched quite deep. And really got into some of the issues and concerns. And I hope everyone felt like they had an opportunity to be heard. And if you have any recommendations or comments, feedback for me for the next meeting, you know I would always appreciate that, whether in email or call me. All right, thank you.